We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
My heart breaks for our whole prison, pipeline system, sure. Right? And want to see that broken entirely. But there's something about, so I worked with 18 and under, right? Of seeing 14 and 15-year-olds that were not dreaming about prom or sports or college or, any of the things that as kids you should be like, have a different lighthearted hope and excitement for your future.
That was Teresa Goines, founder and president of Old Skool Café in the Bayview. I'm Jeff Hunt, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast celebrating the people and places that make this city so special. Welcome to Season 6 of the show. Today also happens to mark our 6th anniversary of putting out podcasts, and we're so excited to kick things off this time around at Old Skool. Over the summer, I was lucky enough to be invited to a private dinner there, and I was nothing short of blown the fuck away. Every single aspect of the evening, the beauty and mystique of the place itself, the drinks, the food, the service, the music, felt transformative. Then I started to learn what it is they do at Old Skool. To start sharing this vision with you, we'll first hear from Teresa. That voice you'll hear pop up a little in the beginning is Chef Eddie Blyden, who we'll hear more from in part 2. Here's Teresa Goines.
So originally from Tucson, Arizona, and I grew up out in the country. So we had chickens and pigs and very more kind of rural.
And the country that is desert,
yes,
right?
The desert country, exactly. Yeah. So out in the desert. But,
with the saguaros?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, she's a cowgirl.
First time I saw those in my life, I laughed because I was like, I've only seen these in cartoons.
You're like,
in like
real.
the Roadrunner.
Right.
They're totally
they're real.
Of course, they're beautiful, but I was like,
that's hilarious.
I couldn't stop
right?
laughing.
I love
yeah,
that.
she used to lasso cattle.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen the evidence. She used to lasso. She roped, the thing.
Did you do
with the rope and the
rodeo?
Tying of the something.
Remember, I'm from Fort Worth, so I know rodeo.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just helped my friend
rodeo,
in roundup.
But you
just in a roundup.
roundup is that the term? Yes.
Okay. So you were born and raised in Tucson?
Yes, correct. And then I went to school in California, Santa Barbara, and then went into probation work right after. I got my degree in psychology and ended up working with the probation department as a juvenile institutions correction officer type role.
Yeah. Is that for the state or were you in a specific?
County.
Okay.
County. So,
Down in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. So we
Okay.
had youth from Lompoc up to about Thousand Oaks near LA.
Okay.
And so, yes, worked in a juvenile hall, and we had 2 camps that are a little bit kind of like the Scared Straight boot camps back in the day, a little bit. So we had 100 young men, male inmates, that would do they could do their confinement time there that would go faster because it was like work crews and military style, that kind of thing.
Yeah. A little different than what you're doing now.
Yes, so that's what inspired. Yes, that's what inspired me to start this. Actually,
did you know coming out of, I guess, college that you wanted to work with youth?
No, I was my degree's in psychology, and I was gonna go on to get my PhD and become a therapist. Is what I thought I would do, psychologist. So I knew.
And then life happened.
Well, I knew. I grew up with my father was severely disabled. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of pain. And so I knew I always kind of had a little bit of a caretaker's heart and wanted, whether it was emotional pain or physical pain, because he also had a lot of emotional pain. And so I think there was always something in me that wanted to be able to help people alleviate suffering, whether it was
caretake,
yeah,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I was drawn to the field of psychology because I wanted to see people free from emotional pain. And so that was sort of, I think, the direction I was going. But I was also interested in law enforcement, and I thought maybe I would maybe go along with law enforcement when there was, a shooting or something, and be sort of a liaison with the community, and or a psychologist also for law enforcement that experienced a lot of trauma, and then that affects, right?
Sure.
That type of thing. And so those are kind of things. And then I probably watched too many cop shows, so I think I was also maybe interested in FBI, and
the
I'm
X-Files.
young, right? So it's like,
You watched the X-Files, didn't you?
So funny. So I had done all the regular psych internships, and suicide lines, and a boys' mental health ward, and really great experience and really intense. And I think I just wanted to try something in law enforcement. So there was an officer that took me for an internship with the probation department. It wasn't with youth. It was actually with the heaviest adult offender unit.
Okay.
But I really liked who I worked with. It was so interesting. I was learning a lot. So they offered me a position right after I graduated. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do this for a couple years, get some good, continue my kind of practical experience. And then I'll go on to get my master's and PhD in psychology. That was the plan. And then they put me in the juvenile division, which I had not had experience with before. And that's what changed my life.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what it is that changed?
Changed, yes.
How were your eyes opened, and in what ways? And
so I think the difference of working with young people versus adults, I mean, it's all, my heart breaks for our whole prison, pipeline
Population.
system,
Sure.
right? And want to see that broken entirely. But there's something about, so I worked with 18 and under, right, of seeing 14 and 15-year-olds that were not dreaming about prom or sports or college or, any of the things that as kids you should be like, have a different lighthearted hope and excitement for your future.
Right.
And when I'm seeing them literally thinking of survival, like they're in a mindset of literally physically surviving. Many didn't expect to even see their 18th birthday.
Yeah.
And then for those that did, they were like, oh, I want to go to county because I can have more freedom and like as an adult in county jail. And I'm like, and so and then the hopelessness, the feeling of how many young people never got visits. Some of them were incarcerated for a year, 2 years, holidays.
That's unreal.
And watching them hope, like as I'm calling the names for who's there and watching their face look every time and drop when their name's not called because they have no visitors. Watching their faces when I'm calling for mail each night, who's written them. And watching young people, kids, really, that feel completely thrown away and forgotten about, who feel like their life has no value.
It's like society and whoever they had in their life, their family, their friends, everyone just gave up on these people. Yeah, and so you saw a need.
Yeah, I think it just seemed, young people that were also really hungry for love, really hungry for an opportunity. And many of them would finish their confinement time, and they let me start. A lot of the programs that I do here at Old Skool, I started actually as a young officer. I was 22.
Oh, okay.
So they let me do a career exploration program there because I was doing it all on my own time. So they're like, sure, if you want to come in on your days off and, just knock yourself out.
It's also kind of how you roll, if I may. I've learned about you.
It's pretty passionate about it, yeah. So they would let me bring in, we would like take over the gym, and we bring in firefighters and computer people, and we'd set up booths so they could go around and have like a career exploration day. And they let me take them down to the city college to explore what it would take, what's like going to college and what kind of classes. And, so I think I would see them start to like hope as they're getting exposed, and those conversations of like, you are amazing, like you're brilliant, and entrepreneurs, many of them, right, just not being given the healthy pathway to use those skills and that those brains.
Yes.
And so then several of them would get out, and then we put them right back in the same environment, right? So you've served your confinement time, but you're going back to the same situation where often a lot of their friends and family members are in that street economy and system. And then we're basically setting them up to fail. So they would often call the jail and say, or the boot camp and say, I want to come back. Like they felt safer. They felt more loved. They felt like, and they're like, I'm not going to make it out here. I want to use, like, things are bad. Dad's in prison. Like, there were just so many hard things but my hands were tied to help them.
Right.
And so then
this is when you're still down south.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And so then they would end up coming back. Now you've got another offense on top of, right? So this is when you've also got the 3 strikes, right?
Right.
And so looking at 15-year-olds that had 2 strikes, one more strike, they're going away for life, and they're 15.
It's unreal.
So I just remember going, and the kids were saying, please help. Like, I want something different. I just don't know how. And I'm like, we're adults. We're the adults in the society. These are children that are saying, please help. And we're not doing anything. We're failing them. And it's like, oh, well, our hands are tied from the system. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is not unsolvable.
Yeah.
So that's where I just really started praying, crying many nights driving home going, there's got to be, God, give me an answer. There's got to be a solution. And that was where the ideas of, okay, something that's going to provide economic support, that's going to hire young people that have felonies, that have a record, that's going to see the gold in them and not be afraid of them or just see their past and be like, oh, it's going to see them as our children.
And break the cycle.
Yeah. Right? Because if I had messed up, how many of us as teenagers did stupid stuff?
Right.
All of us, right? And I would not want somebody to see a mistake I made as who I was.
As defining, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I would want them to see my heart. I would want them to see the whole of me and believe in the best in me and give me that chance versus being afraid of me and saying, oh, that's who you are. Right.
And from then on.
Yeah.
You're defined that way.
And so that was part of also why the restaurant is I wanted, how do we bring society and groups of people together that normally don't intersect in a way that humanizes each other? Because I was like, people aren't going to come to the jail and do tours, even if they did, right? It's a whole, right? So because I was like, how do I get people to have the experience I'm having where I'm getting to know these amazing young people and they're becoming like, my kids, I felt
they're growing.
Yes.
You're seeing it. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, and their stories and who they are. And I wanted society to see them, as I just talked about how I would want to be seen.
Right.
And how we want all of our children to be seen and valued and given opportunities. Right. So I'm thinking, but how's this going to work? Right. Because the whole jail prison system and the rest of society, right? We just see it in the movies. There's not really, and so that's where I kept thinking, how do we bring worlds together to connect on a human level, that we break down all these stereotypes, we break down this other fear, and because when you're not affected or you don't know somebody that's been through it, it's easy to pass laws, it's easy to build prisons for these people over here of which I have no relationship, others. Right? But now if your son or daughter is incarcerated, all of a sudden you have a very different perspective on the system.
100%.
So it's like, how do I get our society as a whole to see these young people as their sons and daughters, as their children, so that they do care about how we're treating them? So yes, it was a much bigger vision of breaking this cycle.
Play awesome jazz and serve you delicious food and be such good service people. That's one way.
Breaking bread together, food around the
100%.
dinner table, in the kitchen, right? Like the basic human needs and pieces that make us all human in that space together. Very,
100%.
Equal.
Food and music. Teresa, how did you get to the Bay? Take us through that.
Yeah,
journey.
So I had a roommate from college that was from San Francisco, and I was living in Mexico for a year and a half to learn Spanish and the culture.
Where about?
In Guadalajara.
Oh.
That was a special part of my journey. And then came back, had a job offer in New York City. And
When you say came back, you went to Santa Barbara, or?
I'm sorry, I came back from Guadalajara to New York City.
Oh, you went straight to New York City.
Back to
the U.S.
Yes, back to the U.S.
Got it.
And that fell through. That job fell through. The organization was going through some kind of inner turmoil, so they hired me from afar. I gave up my apartment, everything, moved for the job, and then they were kind of like, "Oh,
just kidding."
Sorry, just kidding.
Oh.
After I got there, yeah. So that was a little special. Growing.
What year was that?
So it was the year. My start date was September 10th. The year of September 11th.
No, it was not.
Yes. Not crazy.
Did you even go?
Yes. So I was there for several weeks because I was actually
stuck
in the Twin Towers looking for apartments and doing the whole apartment hunt, and then didn't sign the day I decided, let me look, because I was really having a hard time with how small the places were and how much they cost. So I was like,
still a problem.
I was like, yes. So I was like, let me just look for one more day. Surely there's something a little better. So I didn't sign the lease. I was going to give it one more day, and that was the day they sent me an email saying, we're so sorry that we have to go back on our word and bringing you up here, moving countries.
The universe, I think, was telling you not New York.
Agreed.
Right?
Absolutely.
And
yes.
it sounds like you heeded that call.
Right. I mean,
Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah. And it was a good growing learning experience for me, for sure.
So, but you were there that day?
So no. So then I had gotten there early to get my apartment, get everything set up. And then I left like a week and a half before I finally decided. A friend from San Francisco's like, we have youth that need support here. Come to San Francisco. And so I thought, well, I don't really like the weather or the traffic because I'm a warm weather gal. But I was like, I'll come and, hang out with my college friends and maybe explore for a year. I'm certainly not staying.
Oh, no,
than
never.
A year.
Never.
Not with all that rain and traffic.
Yeah.
And then, 21, 22 years later.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
Living in the sunniest part of the city.
It's true,
Yeah.
the Bayview.
Okay, I guess let's dig in.
Yeah.
Because you did mention something about New York, or I think what you said was that your old roommate who was living here told you, we have youth here.
Yes.
So that must have already been on your mind when New York was a plan.
Yes, I was specifically going to New York because they had it was a organization that I had seen them on 2020, and they had a really good program for reducing the recidivism. Like, they had a really good success rate of keeping youth out of jail once they got in the program. So I wanted to go and learn from them. I was like, I'd love to go and volunteer for a summer just to see what you guys are doing, learn from, because I knew, right, I went to Mexico. This whole journey was, I want to create something or be a part of something that's going to break this cycle. I just didn't know quite what it was yet. So, one piece was Mexico, learning the culture in Spanish. Then it was like, okay, this organization seems to be doing some things right. Let me learn from them. And then when they asked for my, resume and letter of reference and stuff, and then they asked if I would consider, because I was not ready to move yet. I was still very much in love with Mexico and considering maybe doing it there,
Right.
And staying there permanently. And they asked, would I consider a 2-year position with them? And I was like, well, I hadn't really thought about moving to New York, but let me think about it. And through lots of conversation, I decided, okay.
So if my math is right, it was about a year and a half or 2 moving here and then starting, I don't want to jump ahead to your house part of this.
Yes.
But what was happening in that year and a half or 2?
Yeah, let's see. So I moved here like around, I think it was like New Year's Eve-ish of 2001, I think. It was
Going into 2.
Right, 2011.
Was
September.
2001.
Okay, yes. So, so going into, 2002. And then I did a gang prevention program for a year, and then the funding got cut and I got laid off. Then I did Head Start for a year or 2. Yeah, I'm trying to think. And then started doing Head Start while I was starting the vision of Old Skool. Started writing down my vision, started meeting with people, the name, starting to do all those pieces in 2004.
Okay.
And then quit my job to do it full time the end of 2005.
And this is what I mean about what I'm getting from your story is like, I'm sure you ask yourself questions and you go, it's not snap decisions, but like you also just do things. You make them happen. So let's hear about, I don't know that everyone relates to that.
That's funny.
I think it's beautiful, but I don't think it's necessarily common.
Oh, it's really interesting.
I mean, is it just the only way you know how to do things in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it probably drives me crazy to see something that's not right or to see something, whether it's injustice or, somebody hurting and just be like, oh, well. Like, I think that my brain can't, it wants to, okay, well, what's the,
Are you hyper empathic?
Mm-hmm, yes.
I learned that term last night.
Oh.
Watching Killing Eve. And I was like, I don't know if I am. I'm definitely empathic, but yeah. Anyway, that's something that I'm picking up.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I never, it's funny because you only know yourself.
Right.
So I think I just, when I was an officer, I remember I was like my future plans had just completely shifted because I was like, I cannot walk away and not do something about what my eyes and heart have been open to.
Right.
I just didn't understand. I hadn't experienced to that level. And when you see that many young people that are saying, I mean, I remember some of the young ladies at the juvenile hall saying, can I please come live with you? Wow. And so when you have kids that are basically just saying, I just want somebody to love me. Right. I want a safe home. I want to belong. Do you see me? Do I matter? Mm-hmm. And to obviously I was a 22-year-old, feeling very, what's the word, inept of what can I possibly do? This feels so massive. As I started, it kind of unfolded how many young people are incarcerated in this country, how many young people are caught up that are trapped in cycles of trauma. And I'm like, who am I to do anything about this, right? But I felt like I could not try to figure out whatever my part could be. It's like if you saw, I'm in imagery, I think about if you saw a baby that was, in the middle of the street, I don't care.
It'd be elbows.
Right. You go and you it's our responsibility, whether we are related to that baby or not. There is a baby, there's a child that is in need, that is hurting, and we have to respond, right? And so it's almost that strong of a maternal, when children are saying, please help me, I'm not okay. We have to do something. I don't know what the answer is, but we have to do something.
Well, speaking of the answer, how did you come by, and was it originally food and sort of the music and ambiance thing, or because it could have been any number of things. Right. And it could have been sports. It could have been whatever.
Yes, and there's so many great programs that I love that creativity of people in different ways. A lot of it came from the youth, right? So really was listening to them saying, that they asking them, what do you feel like you need to break out of this cycle and break out of the gangs and these situations? And they said jobs. I heard the gangs provided a sense of protection, community support, family, brotherhood. And so that I was like, okay. And then the third was a sense of purpose because, they were somebody when they belonged to this game.
They had a role.
Yeah, they had a role. They mattered. And so I thought you can't ask young people to leave drug dealing and some of the ways of making money illegally. You can't ask them to leave their only sense of brotherhood, community, friend, support, basically family, and a sense of belonging and purpose. And if you're not going to be competitive with you, if you're not going to offer something better in those three areas, who are we to say leave that for nothing?
Right.
Just do good and
instead of don't do drugs.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're doing,
for example,
you're doing drugs to numb some pain.
Right.
So what is an alternative to deal with that pain versus just do nothing and feel the pain, right? So now I'm in San Francisco, right? Still pursuing this. How do we address these three things? How do we help youth break the cycle of going back to jail? And in San Francisco, I was new here, but what I definitely saw was a foodie city. That where people spend money is going out to eat,
Yeah.
right? And the city loves entertainment, loves music. And I was like, oh, it's like hotels, it's very touristy. And so all of a sudden I started, and remember, in my prayers, I'm going, God, you like very funny. I'm the least likely person. So you got to give me the answer. So I'm just constantly like trying to listen and think. And I'm like, all these jobs in hospitality. But it's hard to get a job, right? So if you go to a restaurant and you have no restaurant experience, right? But if you do, every city in the world has restaurants, cafes, hotels. And so I was like, wow, that's one of the most transferable jobs that every place has. So, if we could give them experience in that area, then wherever, because often they're transitory, right? It's often like lots of unstable situations if they're in foster care, whatever. So I was like, how can we provide something that no matter where they move, they could walk into a restaurant and say, hey, I have experience, right? The other thing was, at that time, I was talking to people that were servers, and they were making good money with tips, right? So I was thinking, wow, so how do we break the minimum wage ceiling, the poverty ceiling? And I talked to some managers the servers were making more than the managers.
Because of tips.
Because of tips.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, and also being competitive with the streets. In the streets, you're dealing in cash.
Right.
As a server, you're getting cash.
Yep.
Right. So just some of these things that are going to quickly, right, translate. So those were.
And provided a viable alternative.
Yeah, that is
like
really, healthy. And then so many of the young people I worked with were incredibly, like, gregarious and funny and outgoing. I thought, what a great, like, you charm your tables, right? Like you get a chance to, really connect and use your gifts with people in a way. Then you have some other young people that were not, that were more introverted, and they loved the back of the house because they could just focus, and the creativity of being able to create something and focus, with their hands, and then to see somebody love it, right? That immediate satisfaction. So I started going, oh my gosh, in the restaurant, there's like all these different, there's, from hosting to serving, busing, dishwashing, cooking. There's the management, there's marketing, and then the entertainment. I always saw that because we used to do these talent shows at the boot camp.
No way.
And I was like, we have so many talented young people, and a lot of them missed high school, right? Because they were locked up. And so I'm like, where do they ever get to show their talent? From comedians, for sure, to singers and poets and dancers. And so it started with this, like, having a venue where they get paid for, and also like recognition for their talent.
Maybe let's jump ahead to this space.
Absolutely.
And I guess, I'm having trouble, like, where do you even begin? I've seen the before pictures.
Yeah.
I've heard a little bit, but, like, I guess, can you walk listeners through first getting the space, transforming it, eventually owning?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's hear about all that.
Yeah. So I know I'll try to break it down quickly because there is so much to the story, I know. So we got the space. I was talking with, people would often ask, kind of what's your biggest need? And I'd say, a building, because I'm still doing this out of my house, 8 years later. And so there were some pastors that had invited me to share what I was doing with several other groups in the city, ministry leaders, pastors. And they said, a lot of the churches need to get behind you, what you're doing. I'm like, yes, I agree. And so I was thrilled to be invited to share. And so they broke us up into groups of the city, the area. And so there was a couple pastors that were in our group, and they said, again, what's your biggest need? I said, a building. And they said, we actually have this extra building do you want to come take a look? And they had done different things here, for youth and things in the community, but it wasn't really being fully utilized.
And it wasn't a restaurant.
Was not a restaurant. And there was still some church meetings in here and things like that. And so I came in and I said, can I gut it and turn it into a restaurant? And so they negotiated a really low salary for me because I couldn't afford anywhere else in the city. Right? It was just crazy. And again, I didn't really have money. So. We negotiated a really low salary, and then fast forward a few years later, they had a balloon payment coming up, and they said, we're going to have to sell the building, and if we'd love for you to buy it, but I needed to come up with $600,000, which I was still learning how to fundraise. I had not come up with $600,000 in my entire time of doing this.
Can't imagine. Yeah.
Certainly not in a month. And so just, with so many miracles, and, one donor in particular that privately and humbly just believed in our mission and gave us half.
Wow.
Which allowed us to get a loan for the other half.
Wow.
And then just the community and
That's
donors
great.
and people came together to help us purchase it so that it would have ended, right? I couldn't.
Right.
I would either be going back to my house at that point after we had, renovated it. We'd been
For a couple
years, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford rent anywhere else in the city. And so, it was just a beautiful story. And then we were able to, so we bought it, and then we were able to fully pay off our loan at the end of 2019, right before we went into the pandemic. So a lot of miracles.
Yeah, the timing. Wow. And I'm sure it was harrowing leading up to that. But for me, at least, in hindsight, it makes total sense that all these things happened. Because for me, it all goes back to what this place stands for.
Yeah.
Which, thank you for talking at length about that. Obviously, I believe in it, and I think it's so, so important. And I'm like, also, what an amazing way to achieve that vision. On my side, it's like coming and having a really wonderful dinner, usually with friends and loved ones, and then being treated to like world-class service, a beautiful bar with delicious drinks. The food coming out of the kitchen is top-notch, and there's a jazz band. I'm like, what could
That's also youth.
What more could there be? So I guess as you approach your 20th total year, I guess, speak to where Old Skool is and where you'd like it to go next.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap with that.
Okay. I mean, it's exciting. Our team is growing, which I'm so grateful for.
Nice.
Which we're just in a place that means, okay, like the vision has always been, how can we have this type of model, across the nation for young people? Because they all deserve to have this opportunity, right? To, instead of building more prisons, building places of opportunity that invest in them. So, we just brought on an interim executive director a few months ago. And, as our team is growing, we're excited to look at what does that expansion look like, and how can we. A lot of cities have called us for years saying, hey, we love an Old Skool in our city. So we're excited to start to explore what does growth look like now that we have a rock star team here. And we're ready to start expanding.
I think I want to end with the fact that, because we're called Storied San Francisco, but the fact that it is here, and the fact that if you grow in that way, and I fully expect and want you to, but what does it mean to you for it to be rooted?
Yeah.
So rooted here.
This is, and especially in our community, really fought to keep it here, because we don't have the same foot traffic as other places, but, it's really a special place for me. So I just think this will always be the mothership, a place like that is kind of that first root and seed that I envision a place that people could come and visit and see kind of, okay, and then kind of grow out from here. But this is a special place, and we hope that we'll always have our roots here.
That was Old Skool Café founder and president Teresa Goines. In part 2, we'll meet Chef Eddie Blyden and hear more from Teresa about what it's like to run Old Skool day to day. Look for that episode next Tuesday wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Michelle Kilfeather does original photography for us. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.